They sold you a lie, wrapped in molly-webbing and expensive zippers, and I'm about to prove it in the next 40 minutes, using nothing but cold physics, brutal reality, and 8 items that'll separate you from the corpses when everything falls apart. Every tactical bro with a sponsorship code, every prepper influencer with a ring light, every survival guru selling you their $300 bug-out course has been peddling the same comfortable fantasy, showing you their 75-pound pack stuffed with 63 essential items, calling it preparedness when I call it a slow-motion suicide vest with shoulder straps. Because here's what nobody's telling you. When the grid collapses, when the supply chains snap like rotten cordage, when your neighborhood transforms from suburb to war zone in 72 hours, the guy hauling that massive pack is the guy who doesn't make it past the first military checkpoint. He's too slow, too visible, too committed to redundant garbage that stops mattering the second his knees give out at mile 4. And the survival industry is selling you extended camping trips with tactical aesthetics when I'm preparing you for actual collapse. Nuclear, economic, environmental doesn't matter because the physics of survival stay exactly the same. Most of those 63 items are redundant trash, comfort junk, Instagram props that'll get you killed when speed becomes the difference between making it to shelter and bleeding out in a ditch because you were too loaded down to move. But here's what'll keep you watching. There are exactly 8 items that actually matter. 8 tools that create capabilities instead of clutter. 8 multipliers that turn you from a walking loot drop into someone who might actually survive.
And I guarantee the last 3 on this list are things the tactical community completely ignores because they're not sexy enough for YouTube thumbnails. This isn't about what feels tactical, this is about what works when everything else has failed. My name is Fallout Rat, and I've spent too many nights in a garage dissecting declassified military survival protocols so you don't have to die learning the hard way. So let's talk about the only rule that matters. The iron law I call the multiplier law. And it's brutally simple. If an item only does one job, it's a liability you cannot afford. A unitasker is a luxury from the old world, and when you're carrying your entire survival capacity on your back, every single ounce has to justify its existence by performing at least 3 critical functions. Not nice-to-have functions, not might-be-useful-someday functions, but critical life-preserving capabilities. Because we're not packing gear, we're packing problem-solving potential. Think of it this way. In the old world, you had a kitchen full of specialized tools because you had a kitchen. You had a garlic press, an avocado slicer, a lemon zester, but now you have a knife. And that knife better be able to do all of that, plus build your shelter, plus process game, plus defend your supplies when someone decides your knife is now their knife. Because every item I'm about to show you is a force multiplier, a capability generator, a tool that punches above its weight class in multiple scenarios. And in a collapse world, weight is the enemy, and versatility is the only currency that matters. So forget the noise, forget the sponsored fantasy, this is the signal. Item 1 is the spark that defines your survival window. And here's what stops you first. Not starvation, not dehydration, not raiders or radiation, or any of the dramatic stuff you're imagining, but hypothermia. Because you've got maybe 90 minutes in cold, wet conditions before your core temperature drops below the point of no return. Your hands stop working, your brain stops making decisions. You stop being a survivor and start being a statistic in someone else's cautionary tale. And here's the sick joke. You probably think you're covered because you've got a Bic lighter. You've got waterproof matches in a fancy case. You've got a magnesium fire starter from that survival kit you bought on Amazon. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Because lighters run out of fuel and the last gas station closed permanently when the grid went down. Matches get wet despite the waterproof label, and even if they don't, you've got maybe 50 strikes before you're holding a useless cardboard box. And that magnesium striker is a gimmick that barely works when your hands are steady and dry, which they won't be. You need fire, not eventually, not if conditions are perfect, but right now, in the worst moment of your life when your fingers are numb and it's been raining for 6 hours straight, which is why you need a high-quality, oversized Ferro cerium rod. Not the tiny keychain version, not the cheap knockoff that crumbles after 10 uses, but a thick, long, military-grade ferro rod with a dedicated striker attached. And here's why this is non-negotiable. A good ferro rod will give you 15,000 strikes. sparks. 15,000 guaranteed sparks in conditions that would make every other fire-starting method a sad joke.
It works when it's wet. It works when it's frozen. It works when you're shaking so hard you can barely hold it. And the spark it throws is 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot enough to ignite almost anything if you've prepared your tinder correctly. And unlike a lighter, it doesn't care about altitude, humidity, or how long it's been sitting in your pack. But here's where the multiplier effect kicks in, because this isn't just a fire starter. It's a signal device, since those sparks are visible for hundreds of yards in darkness. It's a psychological weapon against despair, because there's something primal about fire that tells your brain you're still in control. And in a desperate situation, that ferro rod can be scraped to create fine metal shavings for emergency tinder, or even primitive thermite reactions if you know your chemistry. One tool with multiple capabilities.
The liquid survival matrix, because the survival rule of threes says 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water. But here's what they don't emphasize. That 3-day water limit is generous. It assumes you're resting in moderate conditions, when in reality, you'll be useless after 24 hours. Your decision-making will degrade, your body will start cannibalizing itself, you'll make mistakes that cost you everything. So you bought a life straw, one of those fancy survival filter things that removes 99.9% of bacteria and protozoa. Great, wonderful. Except what happens when it clogs with sediment? What happens when it freezes solid in winter? What happens when you need to carry water back to camp instead of drinking at the source like a desperate animal at a contaminated puddle, because your expensive filter just became a useless plastic tube? And chemical purification tablets work, sure, but they take 30 minutes to kill pathogens. They taste like a public swimming pool, and they have a shelf life. So when those tablets are gone, you're back to square one, staring at water you can't trust. The answer is a 32-ounce, single-wall, stainless steel water bottle with a nesting cup. Not aluminum, which can leach toxins, not plastic, which melts, not double-wall insulated, which you can't put directly in fire, but single-wall, stainless steel. And here's the physics that saves your life. Boiling water at 212 degrees Fahrenheit for 1 minute neutralizes 100% of pathogens. Every bacteria, every virus, every parasite. It's the oldest purification method in human history, and it's still the most reliable because you can see it working. You watch the water bubble, and you know it's safe. That stainless steel bottle becomes your primary water purification system because you can nestle it directly into hot coals or hang it over flame. It's your water carrier, so you can transport 32 ounces from source to camp. It's your cooking pot because that nesting cup can boil rice, make soup, heat scavenged canned goods. It's your hot water bottle because you can fill it with boiled water before bed, wrap it in a shirt, stuff it in your sleeping setup for hours of core warmth. And it's even a defensive tool in a pinch because 32 ounces of steel filled with water weighs 2 pounds and has enough mass to be effective. One item with 5 functions. That's how you survive. But water alone won't save you, which brings us to item 3. The infinite architecture. Because everyone packs a tent, and it makes sense, right? Shelter in a bag, 4 walls, a roof, a floor, protection from the elements. Except a tent is a 4-pound liability that only does one thing, which is being a tent. That's it. You can't adapt it, you can't camouflage it, you can't use it for anything except being a tent. And worse, it's a giant "I have gear worth taking" advertisement, visible from 200 yards away. Because when things go wrong, visibility is vulnerability. And a bright orange REI tent might as well have a neon sign saying, "Come check out what I have." Plus, tents break, zippers fail, poles snap, fabric tears. And when your single-purpose shelter fails, you're sleeping on the ground, except now you're also carrying 4 pounds of useless trash. You need an 8x10 or 10x10 heavy-duty tarp in a dull, natural color, olive drab, coyote brown, forest green, something that doesn't scream, "Here I am."
And this is the single most versatile piece of survival gear you can own, weighing a fraction of a tent, because it's an A-frame shelter with 2 trees and some cordage, giving you a waterproof roof in 3 minutes. It's a lean-to with one side staked and one propped, providing wind and rain protection with an opening for fire warmth. It's a poncho if you cut a hole in the middle and drape it over yourself, staying mobile in a downpour. It's a water collector when you angle it right and stake the corners, letting rain pool in the middle for gallons of drinking water. It's ground insulation because wet ground sucks heat from your body 25 times faster than air. It's camouflage when you drape it over yourself with vegetation, making you invisible. It's an improvised stretcher. It's a signal panel. It's shade in the desert. It's a vapor barrier in the cold. One tarp with dozens of configurations and infinite adaptability, but you need to build it, which brings us to item 4.
The singular edge, because the survival community has been arguing for decades about hatchet versus machete, folding knife versus fixed blade, multi-tool versus dedicated blade, and they're all wrong, because a hatchet is too heavy and too specialized. Great for chopping wood, but terrible for everything else. So you're carrying 3 pounds of single-purpose tool. A machete is too long, too awkward, too fragile at the tip, making it a jungle tool for jungle problems. And a multi-tool is cute, but when you need to baton through a 4-inch branch to build shelter, those tiny pliers aren't going to cut it. Literally. You need a 4 to 5 inch full tang carbon steel fixed blade knife. And let me break down why every word matters. Full tang means blade and handle are one continuous piece of steel, so the knife cannot break at the handle junction no matter how you abuse it. Carbon steel takes and holds a razor edge better than stainless, and you can sharpen it on a river rock. Yes, it rusts, but you know what else rusts? Everything metal in a collapse. 4 to 5 inches is the sweet spot because it's long enough for real work, but short enough for control. And fixed blade means no moving parts to break because it batons firewood when you place blade on log and strike spine with a heavy stick, splitting the wood. It builds shelter because you can carve notches, cut cordage, shape stakes, strip bark, and it processes game from carcass to cookpot. And it's your last-ditch defense tool. Not ideal, but when someone's trying to take your gear, a fixed blade beats harsh language. One knife with 4 functions that'll still be working decades from now. But tools need support, which brings us to item 5.
The binding that doesn't quit. Because everyone packs paracord, and it's become the default survival cordage since someone decided the inner strands are useful and the entire prepper community accepted it as gospel, but paracord is mediocre at everything. It stretches when wet, so your ridgeline becomes a saggy disaster after rain. It's bulky for its strength, UV light slowly destroys it, and those inner strands are weak and slippery, so you're not catching fish with them. Paracord is what you pack when you don't know better. You need 300 feet of number 36 bank line. And this is what commercial fishermen use, what professional trappers stake their livelihoods on, and there's a reason, because it has 350-pound test strength in a smaller diameter than paracord. It's tarred, making it UV resistant and waterproof so it doesn't degrade in sunlight or absorb water, and it holds knots 10 times better because of texture. So when you tie a bowline, it stays tied. Because it's your ridge line for tarp shelters. It's actual fishing line so you can catch real fish. It's trap line for snares and deadfall traps. It's gear repair thread since it's strong enough to hold under stress but thin enough to work like heavy thread. And it's even emergency shoelaces when you're snap. One spool with 6 functions, taking up less space than bulky paracord, but moisture is everywhere, which brings us to item 6.
The everything fixer. Because here's a truth survival fantasists refuse to accept. Gear doesn't last forever. That tarp will develop a tear. That steel bottle's threads will wear. Your boots' soles will separate. Your clothes will rip. Your pack straps will fray. And when this happens, you have 3 options, which are abandon the gear and lose capability, try to repair with improvised materials that don't work, or Fix it properly with one item that handles almost every field repair you can imagine. You need one roll of high-quality Gorilla brand duct tape wrapped flat around an old gift card or piece of cardboard. Not the full, bulky roll, but 20 to 30 feet wrapped flat for minimal space. And here's why this is essential. It's your first aid kit because you can make butterfly bandages to close wounds, seal punctures temporarily, immobilize sprains, and blister-proof hot spots. It's your gear repair system because you can patch tarp tears waterproof on both sides, seal pack cracks, and wrap split boot soles. It's fire-starting backup since petroleum-based duct tape is extremely flammable, so you can roll a piece into a ball, hit it with Ferro rod spark, and it burns for minutes. It's cordage backup when you twist it into surprisingly strong makeshift rope, and it's emergency shelter repair because you can splint broken poles or create friction junctions. One item with 6 functions weighing 4 ounces flat. And here's the science. Duct tape is pressure-sensitive adhesive with polyethylene-coated cloth backing, so it bonds through contact pressure, stays flexible in cold, and maintains adhesion when wet. Engineered to stick to irregular surfaces and hold under stress. But you're still vulnerable in one critical way, which brings us to item 8.
Your information lifeline. Because here's what they don't tell you about collapse. The most dangerous threat isn't nuclear fallout or raiders or starvation. It's ignorance. Because when the grid goes down, you lose everything. No internet, no news. No way to know if rescue is coming, if radiation is spreading, if martial law has been declared, if it's safe to move, or if you should shelter in place for another 72 hours. And in that information vacuum, you make fatal decisions. You leave shelter too early and walk into a contaminated zone. You stay put when rescue teams are evacuating the region 10 miles away. You don't know which direction safety lies. Most preppers pack a flashlight and call it good, which is wrong because a single-purpose light source eats batteries and does nothing else. Some pack a battery-powered radio, which is great until the batteries die and you're carrying electronic trash. But you need a hand-crank emergency radio with built-in LED flashlight, USB charging port, and NOAA weather band. And this isn't some cute camping gadget. This is your connection to civilization when civilization is trying to reassemble itself. Because it's your information source, since NOAA Weather Radio broadcasts emergency information, evacuation orders, radiation warnings, and rescue coordination during disasters, with no batteries required, since 60 seconds of cranking gives you 30 minutes of radio. It's your light source with built-in LED flashlight for navigation without consuming batteries, since the crank powers it indefinitely. It's your phone charger, because the USB port means you can charge a phone or small electronic device using hand power. And even if cell towers are down, a phone is still a camera, a compass, a calculator, a note-taking device, and a map if you downloaded offline data. It's a signal device, since some models include emergency siren or SOS beacon function. And it's a morale tool, because hearing another human voice, even a recorded emergency broadcast, reminds you that other people still exist and help might be coming. And in a post-nuclear scenario, this radio tells you when radiation levels drop enough to move. In economic collapse, it tells you where FEMA camps are distributing food and water. In environmental disaster, it gives you advanced warning of secondary threats. One device with 6 functions that's self-powered with no batteries required, weighing less than a pound. And this is the item tactical bros ignore because it's not sexy. It doesn't have mole attachments. You can't Cerakote it. But ask any veteran of actual disasters like Hurricane Katrina, Fukushima, the 2021 Texas grid failure, what they wished they had. And they'll say information. Because knowing what's happening 50 miles away is the difference between walking into danger and walking towards safety.
And there it is, the 8 items. Fire with the ferro rod, water with the steel bottle, shelter with the tarp, blade with the fixed knife, cordage with the bank line, waterproofing with contractor bags, repair with duct tape, and information with the hand crank radio. But here's what most people miss. The gear is just the starting point, because what matters is knowing how to chain these tools together, how to see a contractor bag and duct tape and bank line and realize you can build a dozen solutions from 3 items, because the real survival tool is your brain, and the items are just what your brain uses to solve problems. So practice. Actually use these tools before you need them. Build fires in the rain. Set up tarps in different configurations. Repair gear with duct tape. Purify water. Train your thinking to see multipliers everywhere, because when it matters, you won't have time to figure it out. You'll have what you know and what you practiced, and that's survival. The brain using the tools. This is Fallout Rats signing off from the bunker. Stay filthy, stay alive, stay skeptical of anyone selling you 63 essential items when 8 will do. See you in the rubble if you're smart enough to pack light.